Are you considering a career in corporate real estate? Well, if so, have you ever thought about what it takes to become the head of real estate at a Fortune 500 company? Or maybe the vice president of transaction management? What about a real estate portfolio director of a global or national company? Maybe even the head of real estate development. Look, these are amazing roles and opportunities, career opportunities in corporate real estate. So if this is of interest to you, I suggest that you tune in for this video because I'm going to walk you through real life career paths of individuals that have reached these leadership roles in corporate real estate. Now, for each role, I'm going to walk you through two separate career paths so you can see what it took for them to get there. Where did they start? What jobs did they have along the way? What roles did they have, and how long did they stay in those roles? I also want to focus on their education or their certifications and how those things played a part in their success. Now, look, I'm LaShawn Parker of LP Real Estate Consulting. I have so many resources available that to share with you about career opportunities in residential, commercial, and corporate real estate. I've been in real estate myself for over 25 years, and I've held some of these leadership roles in a corporate real estate setting. So look, let's dive in. Let's look at what it takes to get to some of these leadership roles so you can properly plan and project your career in corporate real estate. Now, this is the first of a series of videos as I want to talk about not just corporate real estate, but commercial and residential as well. But this video is not only the kickoff to the series, but it's a kickoff. It's one of two videos in which I'll focus on corporate real estate careers. Now, I want to point out that even though I'm going to talk about real life examples, I'm not going to disclose the identity or company information for any of these individuals because I want to focus on their path and not necessarily their identity. So look, subscribe to this page if you want to continue and follow and find out more information. And also go to my website and get and download some free ebooks. I have free ebooks available that talk about different careers in real estate. I also have an on-demand course that goes in depth into real estate careers, what you can expect, not only to get into the role or how much money you can make, but what you can expect to do in those roles. So look, check that out, but let's get started. Let's get started with our first career journey. All right, so the first role that we're going to look at is the head of real estate. Now, head of real estate is a great accomplishment for those who have worked in this capacity. A head of real estate looks at the overall, is the overall strategic lead for an organization's real estate. They're usually that kind of mediator between the C-suite staff and the key stakeholders, as well as the real estate team. So usually, depending on the company's structure of their real estate team, they may have different departments such as the development department or programming or transaction department or facility managers. They may all report into the head of real estate. Now, that there's other names or titles for head of real estate. Those synonymous names are things like the senior vice president of strategy, planning, or workplace, or the vice president or senior vice president of real estate. But in those cases, those examples, again, those are synonymous names with someone being the head of real estate. So again, we're going to look at two separate examples of career paths of existing or current heads of real estate. And these are both of these professionals that we're going to look at are the head of real estate of major Fortune 500 companies. So let's look into their journeys, how they got to where they are, and we'll go from there. All right, so let's take a look here. This first professional, let's see, my apology, get myself together. All right, here we go. So this professional began their real estate career as a property manager. Now, their profile says that they were a corporate property manager. So I do know what company it is, but my guess is that they were hired in from a brokerage firm to be a property manager within a larger company. Now, they stayed in this role for a total of 2 years, and from that role, I believe they gained a lot of base knowledge. A lot of people in real estate usually start as a property manager. So it's definitely a good entry level role for someone to have. Now, after 2 years, this particular professional moved on to become a manager in the acquisitions and development team of another company. Now, they stayed in this role for 2 years. And in my opinion, this was a great role because it's a segue into a number of different roles. You could obviously go into development, or you could go into transactions, or you could even go into other type of operational roles within a corporate real estate team. So this person stayed in this role for 2 years, and they became a transaction manager. Now, they were a transaction manager for a total of 2 years, and before becoming a lease administrator, which they did for a total of 4 years. Now, a lot of times I've seen people become transaction managers, convert over to a lease administrator, or vice versa. So these roles work together in a lot of ways. Obviously, as a transaction manager, you're participating in strategy, site selection, lease negotiation. And as a lease administrator, you're focusing on the back end of the lease. You're making sure that the certain communications or certain items within that lease are properly being administered and overseen and handled correctly. I've seen many times where people who are transaction managers maybe don't have a full understanding of what should be in a lease. And for that reason, you'll see the lease administrators having to come in and do a lot of cleanup with those transaction managers during the abstract or even a major audit of the lease agreement. So these roles do work hand in hand a lot of times. Again, one on the front end and one more so on the back end. All right. So after being a lease administrator for 4 years, this person was promoted within the same organization as a director of global real estate. Now, they stayed in this role for 8 years, and seeing that they went from a transaction manager to a lease administrator to the director of real estate within the same organization, that let me know that this person was doing something right. They were proving themselves to be a benefit in this role. It looked like they were in different subject matters, and they really learned what the structure of the company in a way that allowed them to qualify and to be the director of real estate within this organization. So definitely a good career progression within the same organization. Now, their next role was a director of global transactions. That was definitely a good projection, a upward move in my view for this particular person. Now, some could say it could have been a horizontal move, but I would say it could be either or, horizontal or an upward move, but definitely director of global transactions is a good role to have. They were only in that role for less than a year before landing this new role, which I will tell you is a Fortune 500 company where they became the director of strategy and planning. Now, they were in this role for a total of 5 years before becoming the head of real estate in their current role. So definitely had a good career projection from being a property manager to the head of real estate. Now, this journey took them about just over 20 years. But what I love is they took their time, became subject matter experts in different parts of real estate, and they were able to use that experience to advance them to the next level. Now, this person also, from an educational perspective, they have their bachelor's in business administration. They also have a master's in management operations. So very well educated there. In addition to that, they have their salesperson's license, which is a broker's license. They also are certified as a RPA, which is a real property administrator. My guess is that they obtained this while they were in the role of a property manager. From there, one great certification that I really endorse and recommend if you want to go into corporate real estate is an MCR. It's a Master of Corporate Real Estate, and it's offered through a company called Coronet. So you usually can obtain your MCR certification between 1 and 3 years, depending on how often you attend certain events at Coronet Global. So definitely a great organization and a great certification to have. Now, just a few points that I want to make about this person's or this professional's journey is that they had steady growth. They didn't rush the process. They took the time to learn and grow, learn and grow. And they also had consistent promotions that allowed them to be exposed to different areas of real estate that positioned them well to be the head of real estate. So kudos to this professional. I think they did great. And they also, again, had some standout certification. So really good path. Again, it took just over 20 years, but they put the work in, and I believe it should be paying off for them. All right. So let's look at the second professional who is the head of real estate, and then we could compare how their paths and their journeys maybe either overlap or how they relate to one another. All right, so this particular professional started their real estate journey as a senior manager of workplace strategy. Now, it's interesting that they started out as in a senior manager role versus a manager role. I will tell you this person had another role before this, but it was not real estate related. But they did find, but it was with the same company. So I think there could be some overlay there. Maybe they interacted, the teams interacted, and this professional proved themselves skilled enough to take on the senior manager role, which is obviously what happened. So they were a senior manager of workplace strategy for a total of 6 years. They then became an area manager of corporate real estate. Now, again, a lot of companies have different titles based on how their real estate team is set up. This particular team has a department known as corporate real estate, even though it's within their corporate real estate team. Now, I'll explain that as we go along with their particular career progression. So they were an area manager, meaning like a regional manager of corporate real estate for this particular company for a total of 2 years, after which they were promoted to an area manager of workplace. So remember, I just told you that sometimes the internal functionality may have corporate real estate, they may have workplace strategy, they may have other terms that they use within their real estate team. So this professional rather, went from being a area manager in corporate real estate to a area manager for workplace. Now, this role they were in for a total of 3 months before advancing to a director of workplace strategy. I believe that those two roles were somewhat synonymous and worked together, but it definitely was a promotion. And again, this is within the same company. And just to highlight, this person stayed in this role for a total of 4 years. Now, after that 4th year, they were promoted. This professional was promoted to the director of design and construction. Now, what you'll find in corporate real estate is a lot of times teams work together, right? Whether you're in programming operations, whether you're in transactions, or workplace, you're usually working together with other teams within your department. And so my guess is that this particular professional sat in on different design and construction projects in their role as being workplace strategy director. And because of that, they obtained certain skill and knowledge that have positioned them to become a director of design and construction. Now, this professional stayed in this role for a total of 3 years, and then they moved on to become a director of portfolio management and transactions. So definitely a different take on within corporate real estate, but I love the diversity that this professional has shown in their career. Now, keep in mind, they've been at this same company from the very first position you see here. So they're doing something right. Okay, so director of portfolio management and transactions. They were in this role for 3 years. Then they were promoted to an assistant vice president of corporate real estate. So again, they focused on corporate real estate, assistant VP role. They stayed in that role for 3 years, 3.5 years, which is also their current role. So very long career history, over 20 years. And what I love is that it's within the same organization. So this person has proven themselves to be teachable, very skilled, and very professional in order to move along within the same organization. So kudos to them. Now, this professional has a bachelor's degree, bachelor's of arts in engineering. They also have an MBA. And just as the prior person, they have the same certification, an MCR, which is the Master of Corporate Real Estate. Now, one of the things I like to focus on and take away from this professional's journey, again, as I highlighted, they were with the same company. You do see consistent promotions. And I like that they became a subject matter expert in various focus areas within real estate. All right. So those are two journeys that we looked at regarding being the head of real estate. And this is just a side by side example. Again, as you see in both of these examples, it took them over 20 years to get there. I have seen people reach head of real estate roles much sooner. I believe the person in career path one became a director of real estate, which could be synonymous with head of real estate, depending on the organization earlier in her career or their career. I'm sorry. I don't have, I know I keep saying her, or maybe I'll say him. I don't know, but I'm not identifying who they are, but they could be a male or female. But this professional has definitely been in a global or leadership role for quite a while before becoming the head of real estate at their current company, which happens to be a Fortune 500 company. So again, this is a great example of two different career paths. And I believe the point I was making is that I've seen people reach these roles in a less period of time, 20 years, but 15 plus years is what you really want to have under your belt, really before becoming effective as a head of real estate. Not necessary and not required, but definitely something that I find to be beneficial because you want to know how to operate in all types of cycles. I mean, imagine going through COVID, which we came out of a couple of years ago. You have to really understand how to strategize, how to navigate, how to adapt, how to be flexible. So lots of seasons and trends that you want to have under your belt so that you know how to react and how to lead the real estate for an organization. And that comes with time. That definitely comes with time. All right. So here is the head of real estate. Let's move on to our next career path. Up next, we have the head of real estate development. All right, so let's take a look at our next career role. So this role is known as a head of real estate development. Now, this is with a focus on in a corporate real estate setting. However, there are roles for parties who are professionals who are head of real estate development, maybe at a brokerage firm or on a consulting level, or maybe with a commercial builder. There's definitely different opportunities, but we're focused on a corporate real estate setting, which we don't have to. It is kind of the same in so many ways, but you're overseeing as head of real estate development, you're overseeing renovation projects, expansions, build to suit projects, different things like that. Anything that's related to the construction and development of facilities for a corporation. So again, renovations, expansions, any type of build to suit project. So look, we're going to continue in our normal path and look at two different career journeys within the pathway of becoming a head of real estate development. So this first professional started out as an auditor. Now, this was their role outside of college. They worked in this role for 2 years, and they were an auditor with a focus on manufacturing and real estate. Now, it's going to be a good guess that role as an auditor of real estate and manufacturing set the foundation and the pace for them to continue forward and progress in the area or sector of real estate. So as we can see, they next became, after 2 years, they became a real estate auditor and consultant. And they were in this role for 2 years. And I can tell you that while they were in this role, this person was working on a specialized degree, which we'll see here. They obtained their JD and became a real estate attorney. Now, they operated in this capacity for 5.5 years, and they were a corporate real estate attorney. So they worked with a lot of companies in their contracts, their lease agreements, their acquisition paperwork, as well as other activities, but they were a corporate real estate attorney. Now, they did work for a law firm, so they did not work in-house, which there are attorneys that do work in-house that are assigned to a corporate real estate team, but this particular person was not in this capacity. So Really quick story. Well, before I tell that story, let's look at their next role. They then became a director of global real estate. Now, what I wanted to say a moment ago is I recall being one of the last two or three, I don't recall, candidates for a head of real estate role. And one of the parties that I was up against was a real estate attorney. And I remember the person that I was going to report to in that role was surprised that an attorney wanted to be the head of real estate. And so that was an interesting conversation that I had with her. But it's not surprising to me, at least, to see real estate attorneys evolve into overseeing global real estate portfolios. So this person was in this role for a total of 6 years. They then evolved into a senior vice president of portfolio accounts, in which they did for a total of 7 years before going into their current role, which was a promotion, going into their current role of senior VP of development. They've been in that role for a total of 4 years. And I actually know this professional, and they're doing an amazing job. They are the senior VP of development, and they are assigned to a specific region that they handle. So there is someone else within the organization that has the same title, but they are assigned to a very specific region. Again, it's a global company that they are employed by. Their career journey took a total of 25 plus years. It didn't take them 25 years to get there, but they've been in the industry for a total of for over 25 years. They have a bachelor's degree in accounting, and they have their JD, as we mentioned. Now, one thing to point out here is this particular professional does not have any type of real estate licenses, nor do they have any type of certifications, whether it's a builder certification or anything like that, or a broker license. They basically are just kind of progressed through their career by being exposed and gaining insight and being mentored, and then were able to head up or become the SVP of development. All right. So a few key takeaways is from this professional's career flow is that they had really good career progression and flow, and they were consistent. They were consistent in their promotions, but also consistent in what they were exposed by. So that's something that really stands out to me for that particular professional. All right, so moving on to the second career path and journey of this profession. Let's see, we have a professional that started out as a market research analyst. Now, this professional started out after college into this role, and they immediately worked for a commercial brokerage firm. Now, this was a global brokerage firm. I know in my career course, I talk about the different types of commercial brokerage firms. This one was a global firm. And one of the advantages of working with a global firm as global commercial brokerage firm is you get a lot of exposure. You're working with a lot of different departments. You're working with a lot of clients, and you're able to just soak in what you need to learn and see and experience in order to plan out your career. And I believe that this is what this particular professional did. So in their next role, by this time, they were licensed, if they were not licensed before, but they were licensed as a salesperson, and they began to operate as a senior associate broker at a global commercial brokerage firm. They then advanced after 2 years into the role of a vice president of brokerage services, meaning they oversaw other brokers and brokerage activities. They then progressed into a senior vice president of brokerage services, in which they did for a total of 6 years. Now, it's going to be my guess that after some time of being in brokerage services, they wanted to do something different. Now, I know I'm telling the story from my perspective, but this is just how it looks from their career trajectory. It looks like they wanted to expand into other areas. So they then became a director of real estate development. Now, that could have been a nice, smooth transition. If that's what they knew they wanted to do, they could have been engaged more with other parties who are in development roles and capacity, so that they could learn and tighten their craft and their skill in becoming that obviously a director of real estate development. They did that for a total of 7 years. Now, at this company that they were at, they were able to be promoted over to a senior Vice President of Development. So they've been in this role for a total of 3 years. And their career journey took them a total of 25 years to get there. So they've been in real estate for over 25 years. Very consistent path, very specific to real estate. They have a Bachelor of Science degree and they are a salesperson or broker. Obviously, in order to handle brokerage services, you have to be licensed. Okay, so again, their career journey began at a brokerage firm and they learned and developed from being an analyst and were able to advance from there. All right, so let's take a look at their career journey side by side. All right, so you have someone who again started out as an auditor and another party that started out as an analyst, but they had very different paths, very different paths, but it led up to the same results where they're both senior vice presidents of real estate development. So kudos to both of them. Very long and established and consistent real estate careers. And so, yes, head of real estate, lots of opportunity for one to develop into this role. You know, there are, just to mention, there are global real estate commercial brokerage firms that have interns available. If you're in college and you're watching this, there are internships available pretty much every year that focus on real estate development. And if you take my course, which is available on my website, you'll see that there are levels to most of the careers in real estate, just as or most other professions, but there's levels to it. So you can start off as an associate, move up to a director or a VP, etc. And so that's what it looks like these parties did. But to make that note that you can start out, even if you know that development is something you're interested in, you could literally start doing that from college, right? As I said, you could start off as an intern and progress into real estate development from there. All right. So hopefully, I'm sure this information was helpful for you. What I want you to do is begin seeing yourself carving out a path for you. Now, development is something that is a very skilled area. So I'm almost certain, but I would definitely recommend that someone who's interested in development, that you really take the time to expose yourself along the way, along your career journey. This is not a role where you want to skip steps. This is not a role where you want to jump from one level and skip a level and go to the next. You really want to have good progression if you're going to be the head of real estate development. All right, so let's look at the next role as it relates to corporate real estate. Next, we're going to look at 2 career paths of real estate portfolio directors. So now let's take a look at the role of a real estate portfolio director. Now, a real estate portfolio director, it could be a regional role, it could be a national role, or it could be a global role. And depending on the size of the company, the organization, or their size of their real estate portfolio, this role may also be the highest role within an organization, or it could be a mid-level role. But I wanted to include it because it is a very popular role, and it is also a good stepping stone to someone who's interested in maybe advancing to like a head of real estate or VP of real estate. But again, this role could be considered the highest level role depending on the actual company and the organization and how their real estate team and how their real estate portfolio is set up and the size of the portfolio. Now, a portfolio director, in essence, is assessing the real estate needs within the region or portfolio that they are overseeing. So they may be looking at utilization. They may be making forecasts based on what the stakeholders are saying that they need in terms of space, real estate related space for their facility. So that's where a portfolio director would come into play. And as we've done before, I want to point out 2 career paths and 2 career journeys of existing real estate portfolio directors. Right. So the first role or career path that we're going to look at for a portfolio director, this professional started out as a real estate finance analyst. Now, this was a role that they had out of college, and they were in this role for a total of 2 years before leaving the real estate industry and becoming an analyst outside of the real estate industry. Now, I wanted to include this information because I thought it was interesting that they were already in real estate. Maybe they didn't like it, or maybe they didn't like the company they were working for, or maybe they found a better opportunity. Who knows what this reason was, but they left the real estate industry for a total of 2 years. And then, as you see, they returned and they decided that they wanted to pursue a career in real estate, which we'll see as their career progresses. Now, they returned to real estate as an analyst and they worked in this role for a total of 4 years. Now, while this person was working as an analyst, they were also obtaining a master's degree in real estate. So we'll see that as we discuss their education. But they were in this capacity for a total of 4 years, gained a lot of insight working with transaction managers and other portfolio directors, and they eventually became a senior transaction manager. Now, in this capacity, they operated in this role for a total of 4 years. And I will tell you, I've seen a lot of progression from an analyst to a transaction manager. I remember when I was a senior transaction manager, which this is not my profile, but I recall our analyst that I worked with consistently at one point came and asked if I could mentor them because they wanted to go into transaction management and eventually portfolio management. So that is a really common trajectory for an analyst to go into transaction management. And from there, after being a senior transaction manager for 4 years, they became a regional portfolio director. Now, this is a global real estate portfolio that they manage, but they are dedicated to one region. So there's a head of real estate that this particular person reports to, but this is their current role. And they've been in this role for a total of 7 years, which also, as a transaction manager, they were also in it was with the same company. So that was a promotion that they received. All right. So this professional's journey or career journey to date has been about 19 years long, and they have a bachelor's in science, and they do not have any other types of licenses, like a sales license or any other types of certifications either. Now, what I noticed in their career path and their journey is that they really had a strong analytical background, and that allowed them to understand transactions as well as portfolio management. And I believe that led them to become a strong candidate for a regional portfolio director. All right. All right. So now let's look at the second career path, and then we'll compare the two at the end. All right. So this person also has the title of a portfolio director. They began their career as an associate broker. Now, immediately that lets me know that they have a real estate sales license. So they began their career as an associate broker at a brokerage firm. I'm not sure of the size of the firm. I just don't recall offhand, but they decided that they wanted to go into brokerage services. And they did that for 2 years initially. And then they were promoted to a senior associate broker, which they did for an additional 2 years. From there, they transitioned into a finance manager. So I thought that was an interesting transition, but a finance manager at a commercial brokerage firm. Now, they also did this role or worked in this role for a total of 2 years before becoming a senior finance manager again at a brokerage firm. This is a great example of levels. You know, in my career course, I always talk about there's levels to a career in real estate. So they went from an associate broker to a senior associate broker, then a finance manager to a senior finance manager for 1.5 years before going into investment sales. Now, I thought that this was an interesting twist to their career, but investment sales is a part of the capital markets category or sector or ecosystem in the commercial brokerage world. So in most commercial brokerage firms, especially the global ones, have a capital markets division. You also find capital markets outside of commercial brokerage firms, but this particular professional worked in investment sales for a total of 3 years at this commercial brokerage firm. Now, after that 3-year period, they were, I'm going to say, I don't know if it was a promotion. It was the same company, but they evolved, I'll say that, into a real estate portfolio manager in which they operated for a total of 3 years before leaving that company and becoming a senior real estate portfolio director. And this is in their current role. They've been in this role for 1 year, and they do oversee a global market versus a regional, smaller regional market. Okay. Now this person has been in the real estate industry for 15 plus years. They have a bachelor's degree in accounting, and they have a master's in real estate. And as we said, with their first role, they're also a licensed salesperson or broker. Now, what was interesting is this person began their their career with commercial brokerage firms, and then they branched off into their current role, which is in the private sector. A lot of times you could work for a commercial brokerage firm and then you go over to a corporate real estate firm based on the networking and the relationships that you had maybe working with in one of these organizations. So a lot of times you'll see someone hired on a corporate real estate team that came from a commercial brokerage team that was contracted for that specific corporate real estate team. Hopefully that made sense. I don't think I can repeat it, but hopefully that made sense for you. All right, so let's look at these two career paths of these portfolio directors side by side. We see their journeys. One started as an analyst, another as a broker. One of the things I want to point out is that I think in both of their journeys, it shows how broad the entry points can be, even when the destination is the same. All right. And both displayed an interest in real estate, though, earlier in their careers. We know one left and came back, but they definitely both expressed real estate as an interest and an intentionality earlier in their career, which shaped them and got them to where they are today. All right. So that is the two career paths of a real estate portfolio director. Next, we're going to take a look at the career path to transaction management. All right, so let's take a look at the career journey and or career path of a corporate transaction management professional. Now, our focus is on a corporate real estate team. However, transaction management can also fall under the umbrella of a commercial brokerage team as well. So a transaction manager handles lease negotiations, site selections, lease renewals, site acquisitions, as well as disposals. They're often a part of an internal corporate real estate team. And when doing so, when they're a part of an internal real estate team, they're usually partnered with brokers, commercial real estate brokers, to assist them with their transactional activities. But you have to be really skilled on the complexity of commercial leases in order to be effective in transaction management. Negotiations are huge, so you want to be a strong negotiator, and you want to know and understand real estate on a deeper level in order to really elevate in transaction management. So with that being said, let's take a look at the career journey of our first professional in transaction management. Now, this person started out as a solutions manager. Now, it's not clear if they were a solutions manager for a real estate team or not, but they did a lot of analysis, a lot of assessment, a lot of forecasting, and they were in this role for a total of 6 years before becoming an associate broker at a commercial brokerage firm. Now, they operated in this role for a total of 1 year, which, before I continue, this let me know, obviously, that they wanted to intentionally either go into or continue into real estate, because obviously to become a broker, you first have to have a salesperson or broker license. All right. So after being an associate broker for 1 year, they evolved into transaction manager, where they became a transaction manager, in which they worked in this capacity for a total of 6 years. Now, at this point, they were still with a commercial brokerage firm. All right. After 6 years of being a transaction manager, they evolved into a senior transaction manager. Now, I cannot portray a more clear trajectory. You go from a broker to a transaction manager to a senior transaction manager. That's actually a part of my profile as well.
However, this is not my professional profile, but that is a very common trajectory. Broker or analyst, and then a transaction manager, and then a senior transaction manager. And from there, it's a lot of upward mobility in terms of your career. Now, this person evolved and left that particular organization and joined an internal corporate real estate team in which they became the director of transaction management. Now, they were in this role for a total of 3 years, and it is the role that they're currently functioning in. Now, their journey was a total of 15 plus years. They have a bachelor's degree in marketing, and they obviously have a salesperson's license because they were a broker, as we see in their second role here. So, what I like about this person is they establish strong transaction management skills through various brokerage activities. All right. So the second journey of the corporate transaction management professional is outlined here. This person started their career in leasing. So they did regional leasing, and this is commercial leasing, not residential. They started their career as a regional leasing manager. Now, they operated in this role and capacity for a total of 5 years before becoming a manager of leasing at a brokerage firm. So they were with a private company. They transitioned over to a commercial brokerage firm in which they pretty much had a similar role. And they did that and operated in that capacity for a total of 6 years. From there, they left the brokerage firm and became a director of corporate real estate. I believe this was for a national company, and they operated in this capacity for 5 years. And from there, they left that role and became an associate vice president of transaction management. What a great trajectory so far. I know there's one more role, but they went from a leasing manager to a director of corporate real estate to a VP of transaction management. And then they were promoted to a senior vice president of transaction management. And that is the same company in which they were an associate VP. So obviously, if they weren't doing a great job, they would not have had that promotion. And I love how their trajectory just, or how their career just progressed. Now, this person is interesting, and I'll tell you why, because they've been in this industry for over 30 years. I think that's the longest career trajectory that we have seen throughout this video, but 30 years. Now, the interesting thing about this person, and this is really important, is they have a high school diploma. They do not have a higher level of education. So out of high school, they became a licensed broker. In fact, I recall reviewing this person's profile, and they had their own company before becoming a regional leasing manager. And their company was real estate related. I chose not to include it because they were self-employed. Not that there's anything wrong with that at all, but they were self-employed as a real estate developer. So I don't know, it wasn't clear if they were flipping houses or doing commercial real estate. So I chose not to start their career journey with that particular role. I looked at it more as this role in regional leasing management because I felt like that was a better trajectory to look at in terms of leading up to corporate real estate. However, again, I am very impressed that they were able to, with a high school diploma, get their broker's license, build a company, and then dive into leasing on a regional level, and then just progressing from there all the way up to a senior VP of transaction management. So kudos to this person. I think they've done a great job in progressing their career over a 30-year period. All right, so let's look at a side-by-side view of the role of a transaction manager or transaction management as a whole, and look at how these two roles compare. Now, one person obviously was well educated. They were very intentional. They allowed their career to progress gradually, whereas the other person was also very intentional about being involved in real estate, and they worked their way up to a senior VP of transaction management. So again, they both appear to have discovered a very specific topic that they were interested in, and they formed a career around it. And obviously, that topic was transaction management. And as you'll see, when you're an analyst or a broker, or even a leasing manager, as you see here, those roles definitely are base level roles that lead to higher level roles within transaction management. All right. So here we are, side by side view of transaction management.
So there you have it, real world, real life career journeys and career paths of leaders in the corporate real estate arena. I'm sure this information was helpful for you, especially if you are aspiring to go into corporate real estate and you kind of want to know what direction you should take. I believe these profiles give you a baseline of where you can start. Now, that was part 1 of part 2, and we're going to continue in our corporate real estate sector, and we're going to look at more operational roles in the next video. So, we're going to look at roles such as space management, project management, facility management, and workplace experience. Great professionals with great career paths, and I'm sure this information will be helpful for you as well. Now, if this information was helpful for you, I'm going to ask you for one big favor, and that is to subscribe to this channel. I love to have you follow me on this page, and I love to share more information with you as it becomes available to me. Now, also, you can go to my website as a reminder at lprealestatecareers.com, and there you can download free ebooks. I have other books that you can purchase, but more importantly, there's a career course that I have that I created just for you, the aspiring real estate professional. And in that course, I go through so much detail about every career path and every career role within residential, commercial, and corporate real estate. So until next time, I'll see you then.